Hi, everybody. Rebecca Nelson, Becker, with you here from Becker Vineyard. Jon's spitting up his wine right now. Hold on just a second. Welcoming you guys to fabulous another virtual tasting here with us. Like we said on Monday, this is our Father's Day week celebration package. So we're doing our Canada Family Cabernet Sauvignon Reserves from our library series. So tonight we're pouring the 2014 vintage. I'm really excited for you guys to get started on this. Hopefully you've had it at least in your glass, letting it kind of aerate and open up a little bit for about the last 30 or 45 minutes. We've been doing that here and it's really coming alive. It's absolutely fantastic. Tonight we have with us our owner, Dr. Richard Becker, with us once again. We also have our winemaker, Jon Leahy, and our general manager, Bret Pernew. So we've got three of them to get you guys through this fantastic wine, and I'm going to turn it right over to them to get you started. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Cheers.
Cheers, Rebecca. Thank you for another wonderful introduction. Before we get going, Doc, it's good to see you again this week. We were worried you had abandoned us.
But that was Tom Brady's birthday party, so yeah, that's somewhat abandoned, yeah.
And that party to go to. Yeah. So would you like to introduce the day for us?
Just a little bit about the day. Governor Abbott has asked that we all consider, because of the explosion of coronavirus in our state, that we stay home if possible, that we stay apart, that we wear masks. These aren't mandates, but these are, very intelligent requests. So if you think about conditions in the Canada Vineyard in June, July, August, when it's 100 degrees, there's no problem avoiding a crowd. I don't think they wear masks. They might wear some bandanas around their necks, but that's probably a safe place to be. Jon always notices Abraham Lincoln looking over my shoulder and asks if that's my high school graduation picture, which I greatly appreciate. This is a time for all of us to have Lincoln looking over our shoulder a little bit. My father always thought no one needed that more than I did, but I'm glad to have him here.
Well, we are glad to have him here as well. And just so everybody's clear, comparing your boss to Lincoln for a graduation photo is not a great way to ask for a raise or a promotion. So,
got bird written all over it, Jon.
So anyway, Bret, we've got the notes here for this, and I'm going to dive right in. And then, Bret, I want to just recap for the folks who are joining us for the first time on the Vineyard. But I want everybody to swirl, sniff, and taste this. I've had this decanted now for about 45 minutes. This 2014 is turning out to be pretty amazing. Oh, yeah, that is some really good wine. And Bret, if you want to lead us into the Vineyard a little bit.
Yes, so I'm running out of stories to talk about for Canada, obviously, but I mean, we have 100 stories that we like to tell, but this particular, you got to realize as this vineyard was coming into its maturity, they planted in 2007, the first 2.5 acres, and then she kept adding other blocks through, I think, about 2010. And so this was probably the first year where that younger block was really producing anything, just being about fourth leaf. And I think that is interesting as we taste through these, and I want to point that out as that vineyard progressed in its age. She did tell me when I talked to her on the phone today that this vintage was, obviously the reset after the 13 vintage where we had the freeze that wiped out about 85 or 90% of the state of Texas, different, by varietal. But this was kind of a reset year. I also forgot that there are other vineyards in that vintage got froze as well. In 2014, she lost most of the Chardonnay and most of the Malbec to a freeze in like April 10th. So as we go through this, I'll let you kind of talk about the wine a little bit, and then I'll get back into specifics.
Yeah, no, what I remember, and then I'm going to get Doc's impressions on the wine. But what I remember about 14 specifically was that, we were going into it knowing that we were going to be down a fair portion just from the residual effects of 13. And after such a light harvest in 13, we were so looking forward to the fruit that we were getting. And that it was heartbreaking not to get the Chardonnay, but the Cabernet came in so beautiful, lighter than we expected, just a couple, 3 tons to the acre, but the intensity, and this is exciting for me because I have not actually had the 14 in quite some time. And being able to pull the cork on this, decant it, and start to smell it, it's like, yeah, it's really fun because I can remember back to what I'm looking at and this afternoon going through my harvest notes on this particular block and grape and seeing how it's developed. It's been something amazing. So Doc, what do you get on the wine, sir?
One thing I love all of the wines that we produce from Brenda and Dwayne's fruit and their son, but there's always, it's something when I first smelled it, it's like the grapes from the Russian River Valley. There's always something in all those wines, and the cabs, and the pinots and the chards. And there's something in the aromatic in this fruit that it's not in the wonderful wines from Jet's Vineyard 10 miles away or 5 miles, whatever it is. And there's an herbal note.
So let me introduce you to Fred, a little yeast friend of mine that actually is a yeast isolate from, oddly enough, the reason I'm laughing is because I swear to you, you've probably looked over my shoulder at my notes. So part of this was fermented with the yeast that I isolated back in 2006, 2007 from the Russian River Valley. And I've kept slabs in my freezer, it's yeast. But it brings out a really intense herbal note on Zins, on Cabernet, on Merlots, not so much on Petit Verdot though. It's almost neutral on several other respects, but that may be it. I don't know, but it definitely enhances some of the herbal quality. What I noticed on the nose when I first opened it up is that deeply intense earth and almost soy sauce-like edge from a well-aged wine right before it starts to brew. Yeah,
John, you don't use that in Jet's Cabernet, the same yeast, or no?
I have, but it's year specific when I decide to use it, because it is it's an extraordinarily hungry yeast. It does a quick job, and if I'm worried about any kind of damage, I want to get that ferment going quickly, and then I'll use it on part or all of a smaller lot. It's also very symbiotic with one other yeast that will co-ferment. We'll start it off with one and finish with the other, or vice versa. So there are a couple of different things. And I have used it. I used it in the 15 on part of Jets. But, that also is, it's going to concentrate whatever's in the grape to begin with. So, right. So Bret, what do you think of the wine?
Sorry, Crystal was giving me a note, and my eyes are not as good as they used to be, and I had to squint. So. And again, I keep going back to that same note that we talk about every single time we pick this wine up. It's got that kind of, it's got a bell pepper note that's not off-putting at all. I do get that herbal note that comes out of it. And again, going back to this, is if somebody hands me this in the tasting room, almost no matter which one of the vintages of that vineyard that we have, I can pick it out that it's Canada family. It's just got a very unique flavor that we get out of our program, and that's what I'm picking up. I can't say forest floor again. I've already used that one once, right?
But in fairness, you're right though. There is some consistency, vintage to vintage in this vineyard on there.
Yes.
So
very much.
Yeah. So Doc, what do you notice consistently now through the vintages with the Canada vineyard? What are some of the notes that you will automatically pick up?
Well, certainly, the humus, forest floor, cigar box, leather, all of those things that are really good Cabernets, but the herbal note, and then some dark fruit, raspberry. It's just a wonderful Cabernet. It could be from anywhere in the world, and it's very meaningful to me. That's from Texas fruit.
Yeah, I was going to say it could be from anywhere in the world, but it's from Texas, and that's something I think we can all be very, very proud of on there. So I like that cigar. There is a bit of tobacco in there, and I'm really enamored with this. And I hope people aren't getting too put off with this. There's a little bit of mellow bell pepper in there, but the cigar note, that tobacco note, it's aging quite nicely. I'm very excited because this is what I consider the early period.
Raspberry on the finish. The raspberry on the finish, I think, is really surprising. I mean, it's
Absolutely. So Brett, with this 14 was the year that we actually divided the old from the new, on that vineyard. So what did you notice then versus now?
Well, I think now they're doing the work to retrain the vineyard because they had that devastating freeze at Halloween last year. So when we went up there and looked at it, they're going to have to spend a ton of time and money to get it back up and going, and it's just really heartbreaking to have to go look at it. But I do think that the very first vintage that we made from their grapes was the 2007, and those were some of the best that I can remember. And I think that as those 2010 and the two different plantings, I think in this particular vintage, I think if I remember right, we like the younger stuff better than the older because it wasn't very concentrated in tonnage. Didn't have a lot of tons breaker, but the fruit concentration was there. And I think when we were there last time with Joe, Joe asked the Canadas, he says, are you sure you didn't get some Cab Franc mixed up in this planting?
Right.
Just because it has such a Cab Franc note,
Yeah. I love Dwayne when Dwayne can just kind of roll with everything. His response is, "Oh, it's possible," but like anything's possible. But that year, and I'm cheating off of the notes here. A couple of inches of snow in February, then a really heavy rain right after bloom on the Cabernet in May, and then virtually no rain in June, July on there. So we did have a lot of smaller berries on the younger ones. We had a much higher skin to juice ratio on there.
A lot of times, John, too, right before they pick, they go through and they kind of take off the extra vines that they don't need for harvest. And originally, I think when they did it, they did a lot by hand. And then Dwayne fabricated his hedger that he puts on his tractor. It's pretty cool if you get to see it, but it's not a $50,000 attachment. He made it and it works just as well. But they told me today that they had some friends on August 23rd on the younger block come and help them pull those vines or pull the extra vines out of the way. And she said it was Warren, Margaret, Sandra, and Kenny. So we want to give them a shout out to help, for helping pull that stuff off so that we could get this in such a great shape.
Yeah, right on. And she had her, was that the grandkids too? They were doing bricks for the first time that year?
Yeah. So the other funny story on that was she takes her young grandson out. She said that he was 6 years old. I think it's the youngest one at that time. And they went out to go do sugar samples. So once the fruit hits about 18 bricks or so, we really like our growers to at least get it every, twice a week. Once it hits about 21 bricks, we want it every other day. And she went out to get a sugar sample, and she took her grandkids with them. And she said that the littlest one, I believe, said, "Grandma, we need to grow these grapes a little shorter so I can be able to reach something, so I can pull a sample out," which is hilarious, even in the fact that if you go to their vineyard, it does kind of have a high fruiting zone. So the fact that the way they did their trellis and how good Dwayne built those trellis systems, I think it's kind of high for certain locations, but that was kind of a neat story about their grandkids being part of the family. And that's why we call it Canada Family Vineyard, not just the Canada Vineyard.
Yeah. And so I got a question here, which directly relates to that. Sorry, I was just looking over here. It just popped up. Do they hold irrigation just prior to harvest? And
it depends.
Yeah.
I mean, the number one question or the answer when it comes to the vineyard is and probably in most of our winemaking questions, it depends on what is going on. But, some people have read books about deficit irrigation in other parts of the world, and we may hit a dry spell where we are in a drought and it's 105 for 60 days. That's probably not the best time to not water. You have to balance what's going on in the vineyard and what you're seeing. And that's what makes the growers that grow these grapes so wonderful. Is that they can go out there and they do use science, they do use technical devices, but I guarantee you she can walk out in that vineyard, and Dwayne, anybody in their family can walk out there and kind of see what's going on and know whether or not it needs water. And there's a method to that deficit irrigation that, don't get me wrong, but I've also had new growers that have called me in late July in the hill country and say, "I read the book that says no water and I don't understand why I have no leaves." And it's like, well, maybe you should have turned the water on, Right.
So real quick, the difference. So Doc, you were mentioning, you notice one thing in Canada versus the other, and it could be part of the yeast that I use, but also, the Canada vineyard sits directly on top of the Pliocene aged formation, which is about 2.5 to 5 million years old, where just 20 miles away, Jets is on the Quaternary, which is only about 1.6 million years old. So two different things very close together. And, over the overall area up there is the Ogallala Formation, that south sandy loam where Jet is more prominent than where the Canadas are. So that, there's a lot to be said for that as well.
The Quaternary, Jurassic, Triassic were, three geologic ages together.
Yep.
But I think that in part the heavy calcareous subsoil, the caliche subsoil that's in that area is really one of the reasons the red wines are so wonderful.
Oh yeah.
I think that's what it's all about. And I don't know the depth of the calcium deposit in her vineyard. I know in Jets it's about 6 feet, 4 to 6 feet, and I'm not sure how deep it is. I do know that people harvest caliche out there.
It's nothing up there at hers. I mean, it's a surface and down. I mean, you can really see the soil there is very shallow at the Canada area. So that, it'll be interesting. So I've been working on, by me, I asked my wife, the geologist, to work on an overlay on some of the geology around there, which is really fascinating to me to get in there. But anyway, back to little story time, and everybody should be tasting this wine again. So Doc, you've had multiple vintages of Canada. What 3 or 2 vintages stand out in your mind?
We haven't heard from Rachel in a week, and I think she's probably by now finished off the 07. So, Rachel, I'm just kidding.
Probably more than all of it. Yeah.
It's hard. I really love these wines, and especially the older ones. The 12 we're going to taste Friday night, which will be a treat. The 6, the 15, 16, 14, 17, they're all wonderful. I would say the 12 and then maybe the 10 and then maybe the 7, but it's amazing about tasting the fruit that these people grow when it made into wine. It's really wonderful.
So, so to answer your question about the calcareous, it's about 14 to 30 inches up around the vineyard.
Okay,
Yeah.
Interesting.
So,
thinking about that in Champagne, the Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are basically in the White Cliffs of Dover. I mean, that's what goes under that part of the world. And there's something about grapes and calcium-bearing soils that are a real magic mix. And I think that's part of what's happening here.
Well, what I find interesting, and I compare just to compare this versus Napa area, and up in the foothills, the Napa Valley. So there's a lot of tuff up there, which is volcanic ash. And that deposit, especially there have been a couple of vineyards that I've dealt with where that deposit is several feet deep. So those vines are in that ash, that old volcanic ash, the old Sonoma volcanics. And yet you get some very intense mineralization out of there that's similar to this. So that's.
I love my promise. It's basically planted to caldera.
Yeah.
And the old volcanic crater, and wonderful flavor of those Cabernets, in my opinion.
All righty. So, Bret, story time. What do you remember about the 14 harvest?
Oh, not very much. I know that we were happy to get grapes in after 13 was so bad.
Right.
And again, going back to when I called her, a lot of times there, we have the story of the 2009 where the kind of the storm parted and all that stuff, and that I've told a million times. And historically, I was looking at the notes on this, and they did get a rain. They got 2 inches of rain on August 23rd, which I think we picked it on, maybe 2 weeks after that or something. We waited into September. I don't think it was very deep. Do you have in your notes when we picked it? Because it's not on mine.
Yeah, we picked the Cabernet got picked at the very first part of September.
Yeah. So when those people are over cutting the vines off on August 23rd, it kind of tells you that they're ready to start harvesting. So I knew that there wasn't much drama that went on, which does make, from the side of the grower to the winery a lot easier. when they go out and do their sugars, the thing that we want to see is ripeness building, mature fruit, so we can get it off the vine and get it home. And other than that, I didn't have any notes. So, that's where I'm at.
The one thing I remember about the 14 harvest, after it was a couple of months after the harvest, we were going through tasting the wines, and that was the time that Dr. Becker said, "I think you could buy your house now." So we've got, let's see here. I just noted, I'm trying to scroll back these questions here. The barrel program, which people want to know. So this 14 also represented a pretty heavy investment into French oak with this wine. It certainly saw some American oak. We were still using the A&K barrels in 14, which are wonderful American oak barrels. And there are a couple of West Coast cab, or there's one West Coast cab producer that uses them almost exclusively. And that's, so we were fortunate enough to be able to use some of those. But then we also had a fair portion of the Demtos Allier forest designate barrels in there. So 36-month-old aged staves and medium plus toast, which is really fun to go through there because they toast to a specific temperature range, not time, but they measure the temperature in the wood, and that's when they pull it on there. And that's always fascinating to me, how each cooper does it slightly differently. So their medium toast is different than somebody else's, but we really found that to be quite enjoyable. We aged it. This wine did see some bétonnage on some of one of the lots of the Cabernet. Got stirred pretty heavily all the way through malactic fermentation. So this, the Cab did go through ML, all of it. And then the Merlot and the Malbec, oddly enough, both of those that year did not. And the Merlot, if I remember correctly, took forever to finish primary. And I'm sure Rachel's going to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure it was the 14 Merlot that stymied halfway through fermentation. It didn't finish until later that spring. And we were actually popping bungs that summer right before harvest. It just finally kicked off. It had like 2 or 3 grams left. So that made for a very interesting long maturation on that wine. So there were some very unique situations there. 14, we did extended maceration. That was the year that Doc said the best wines we ever made, we extended the maceration on. And so we did an extended maceration on the Cabernets, but not the Merlot. So the Merlot portion went old school. We had it for 3 days on skins and then started the fermentation. So that's pretty much the major differences on the 14. We carried through with some of that on the 15s too. And Brett, I don't have the notes here. Were there any awards on this?
We didn't see any, which when I say I don't see any, and Doc will probably get mad at me for this, because I don't usually print them if they're bronzes or silvers. And again, I asked them if there was any on there and they said no. So that might be my fault for saying that,
right.
We're not going to promote the bronzes and silvers that we got. Cause again, we get so many golds and that's just the way it is most of the time. So, and I don't know where this even got sent, when there is a lot of it in the library, this is kind of one of the things that if you come to the library tour and you taste downstairs with us, some of that 2007 vintage that Dr. Becker was talking about from this vineyard, we only kept about 50 cases. And I think by the time we got into the 14, we were probably keeping back maybe 200 or 300 cases for the library program. And we do keep getting into it. So we're probably down to 70 or 80 cases of that 200 or 300 that we kept. So we're kind of ratcheting it down a little bit, but at the same time, like I said in the previous broadcast, we want to be able to go back and visit those a long time from now. So hopefully we got enough stored for that,
Well, I hope so too. This is nice. So again, to remind everybody, if you want to save this wine, if you have an air saver or a pump saver for the bottle, you can try my little shortcut trick of putting the cork back in and throwing the partial bottle in the freezer. It's good for a couple of days that way, but we will pull everything out on Friday. Again, Friday, we're going to do the 2012 as the kind of the penultimate here on this vertical, but we will recap each year on Friday as well. If you want to save your wines and do them all on Friday, that's fine too. Next week, what are we doing for next week's?
We've got the Monday, we got Muscat Chenin, which is an off-dry wine. We've had a lot of requests for those. the Main Street Cabernet, which is only available in our Main Street tasting room, normally in downtown Fredericksburg, where I'm at right now. And then the Primavera, which is one of our Quattro Stagioni lines. And the new Primavera, for some of you guys, this is not the new one yet, but the new one is going to have the Sangiovese from our wine club block that everybody's been waiting for. So I just let a little secret out that I don't think we've announced.
And so I'm going to follow this up because we're going to get phone calls from all of those wonderful club members that were there. And I've been harangued by a few of them in good nature, by the way. But we bottled it. It went into the bottle 2 days ago. So it's bottled and now in the cellar, relaxing in its bottle. So it has been bottled, freshly bottled. It is. And we will, of course, announce to those folks when we're ready to release it. So.
And it's not straight Sangiovese. We blended some stuff with it. Yeah, so it's not just a straight block, but it's definitely got it in it.
But it's
in a large percentage.
It's more of a, I don't want to get in trouble, but it's more of a Chianti-like Sangio, predominant Sangio. But there are a few other Italian varietals that found their way into it. Like the Italian Cab and the Italian Petit Syrah.
So Doc, I have a question for you because on the one on Monday, people were asking, or we got questions about how to remember like the different vintage. So if you tasted the first one on Monday, the second one on Wednesday, and the last one on Friday, how did you learn to remember what those tastes were? Because I think that's one of the most challenging things that we hear from people is how do you train your palate to remember what you tasted a month ago? Or
I think it's just an experience thing, and we've tasted it and we've spit out a lot of wine. So in the last 25 years, but there's a memory for taste, like for many other things. And when you start doing it, you kind of train your mind to remember tastes. And if I taste a wine I haven't tasted for 10 years, I think I remember it. I remember the minute I taste it. It's like seeing a landscape scene or a person. There is an area in the brain that remembers taste, and you kind of have to have the experience of trying to make it work. But I think you just have to. It's trial and error, repeating, but I think it's real.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do. I think palate memory is very real, and I also do think when you're dealing with it frequently, you do remember. Previous vintages or previous components, and can make a fair comparison.
And you're not expecting it to happen. That's the first as I began to experience this. That was the most amazing thing for me. I was kind of a light bulb goes on. And I said, "Gosh, I tasted that 10 years ago," and it's a wonderful part of the experience. I think, trying to learn about wine.
Okay, guys. So we got it. We're coming to the food portion. So. Doc, what food would you pair with this particular vintage?
Gosh, this is hard. I think again, Tom Perini's tenderloin would, in my mind. That on your best job.
Well, Bret. Hey, Bret, do you want some Manchego?
Yeah, right.
A nice triple cream free? Yeah, I don't think you could go wrong with that tenderloin at all. So Bret, besides tenderloin.
Yeah, right. So I'm gonna give you two answers, and I hope I steal yours, John, because he just stole mine, right? No. No, when Perini came down and did a dinner for us, we did a fundraiser for Texas A&M for the Research Center here in Fredericksburg. And they cooked a beef short rib that they do at a lot of their catering events. It was this crazy, good beef short rib, and I'm pretty sure that we had a Canada Vineyard, and Miss Canada was actually at this dinner. We raised, I think, with the people that were there, over $35,000 to keep the lights on at that research center between their funding issues back then. So that's my first choice. I think my second choice would be like ossobuco or something like that. So I hope one of those was yours.
Ossobuco. Yeah, no, you know what? The short ribs, I was actually thinking ribs earlier. But to be honest with you, I love barbacoa. So a really good traditional barbecue. And I was thinking that, and then I thought, we were at as a winery, we were at a Brazilian smokehouse or steakhouse not too long ago. They had the slow roasted meat there, the pork, but I was thinking that with a little bit of roasted cherry chutney on there. And I've had a really nice cherry chutney with wine before, and I think that would go very well. Has the right amount of fat for these tannins. So I'm going to go with that. Pork with a little chutney on there. So not too spicy.
Mhm.
All right. So, but okay, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, our Wednesday episode. I'm really excited about Friday. Please join us for the 2012 Canada. And don't forget, we're going to recap. Now, I'm going to leave everybody up to their own devices. They should make a little bit of food for Food Friday. What I would suggest, if you are so inclined, is to do a steak or some type of beef, thinly cut, and then put it on a little brioche or something like that. Make it a light, cool finger foods. Try it that way. If you want a full meal, go for it. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do for Food Friday yet, but we'll have a little snack and we'll chit chat about the food and the recap for all three of these wines. So, Doc, would you like to take us out?
Yeah, one last word. My sister, who's probably the best athlete in our family, after my mother, who won a women's high school basketball championship when she was 18 with her team. My sister has just bunged her knee, and so she's been soaking it in wine. And I just called her and told her to drink some. It'll make it much better. So, Carolyn, have a little bit of this. It'll help you.
Well, cheers, Carolyn. I hope your knee's better. And everybody out there, thanks again for joining us. We wish you great health, good wine, and a happy rest of the week. We'll see you on Friday. So cheers.
Cheers.
Mhm.